Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds, here on the campus of His Way in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, I have a special guest, Benay Blume. I met Benay a number of years ago, and she actually just called me a little bit ago and wanted to stop by and visit. She's from out of state, certainly way out of state. Yeah. She's from Porto Alegre, Brazil. And so I'm glad to have her today. We just got talking. I thought, Mo, I'd love for you to share with folks who love recovery and love the message of the gospel getting shared with people who are hurting. Would love to hear your story and what you're doing and what you and your husband are about. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And I guess I'd like to start maybe you can explain how you originally got connected with His Way, when that was, what kind of originally happened, and we'll kind of walk through the journey.
Okay. So my husband and I have been missionaries in Brazil for like 20 years. We moved there in 2002, and we worked in church planting for a while. And after a certain period of time, we were sort of praying about what the future for our ministry would be. And God sort of directed us to start volunteering at a rehab farm for people in recovery there close to our city. And so my husband started going, Kevin is his name, he started going out there a couple of times a week. And then my son started going out there. And then I started going out and teaching classes. And we just really fell in love with that work and just loved being like having a front row seat to watch God change someone's life. And I'm kind of a teacher by trade, and really started loving developing classes about recovery and researching and coming up with different ways. And so through that, we kind of were trying to accompany the guys in rehab. And after they would finish, 9 months usually in the rehab farm, we would try to help them as they transitioned out. But what we saw over and over and over again is that they didn't last very long sober out. They weren't prepared. The people who were receiving them were not prepared. And pretty soon after that, they were back using drugs again. And it was just like a cycle. And we were really kind of frustrated about that and trying to find ways to help. We sort of opened up like a halfway house with another person, and that didn't go well because the other person and my husband and myself didn't have exactly the same vision. Right. And so around that time, we came here to Huntsville. I'm from Huntsville originally, and we came here to visit. And a friend of ours, Alan Langford, who is an elder at the church that supported us at the time, Monrovia Church of Christ, he said, you should go by and visit His Way. And so we did. And it was just like when we saw the program here, it was just like very eye-opening. I keep saying it's like the scales fell off our eyes of like, oh, here's what a rehab program could be like, because all we knew was these rehab farms.
When you say a rehab farm, maybe you could explain what that is.
Yeah, okay. So in Brazil, if you want help, if you're addicted to drugs, and you want to get out of that life, your options are to go to a clinic, which is paid for by your family and does not have a good success rate at all, or they call them therapeutic community is what the traditional word for it is in Brazil, therapeutic community, which is usually out kind of in the countryside area surrounding the big city where you're set off away from everybody else. And it's kind of like very rustic. They might have a Bible class. They have like Bible reading 3 times a day, prayer times. They have some fasting. They'll have some churches that'll come in at night to do a lesson, or a worship service or whatever. And then, you just kind of stay there.
Work on the farm?
Yeah, okay. Work on the farm, having a garden or taking care of animals.
So it's literally a farm.
Some of them are. Some of them are not quite as much of a farm as others. But, as far as a recovery program, first you're going to learn this, then you're going to learn this. It's it's just not, they don't have the resources to be able to offer that.
Right.
They're doing their best to just keep them fed and having the church services come in and do some, but as far as changing their way of thinking, it's not as much. And so, so we were seeing this cycle, happen of them just getting out and not having the support that they needed. Right. And so when we came to visit His Way, we just saw something completely different. And we loved it. And even actually at that point in time, we're wondering if God was leading us to move back to the States and work with you guys here at His Way, getting some training and everything. But after we kept praying, God sort of put on our hearts, no, do that there. And at the time that He said, do that there, we did not have even what we needed for our own family to stay there. But God is just so good and gave us immeasurably more than we could ask or think. Right. And so we were able to get support for our family to continue, get enough money to buy a property. And so then we went through a long period of trying to remodel that property so that it could be used for what we call Hope House, which is patterned very largely after His Way, but we call it Hope House. And so now we have a house which can hold 16 men. We're taking people in groups. And so our first group, there was one student, but he's amazing and he is still with us. And we see that he will probably move in to be like a house leader, like a monitor or a leader in-house. Okay. And then we just took in 3 more guys. And so we've patterned our program largely on His Way. The idea of the first 2 months are just classes. And so that's been very rewarding just to be able to show them some things, teach them some things, everything. I mean, we've copied the idea of offering the classes on financial responsibility, work ethics, the life of Christ, recovery classes. So that's what we've been doing, and it's going great.
That's great. That's just so exciting. What kind of, I guess you said earlier about just being engaged with this initially. I know you said that you kind of felt like you had a front row seat to God changing lives. What really, for you and your husband both, really drew you this? I mean, it's one thing to go to a ministry, sit and kind of get to know a couple people and say, this is really awesome. Maybe walk with a couple people. It's a whole nother endeavor to spend the last, since I've seen you, 6-7 years working to raise money and create this whole thing. There's some kind of vision here. There's some drive that says, this is something we want to dedicate ourselves to. So what is that? I mean, what is it that you're ultimately passionate about in that sense? What are you hoping for?
Well, when we first started going to visit the rehab farms, I was scared. And I think my husband was a little bit scared too, but mainly me, I was scared. Because in Brazil, drug addicts are like the worst people in society, and people do not give them a chance. I mean, it's more like just stay away and they're afraid, and the more we visited and got to know them, we saw that they're good people. And honestly, I have a son who's 26, and I saw in them what my son could be if he hadn't had the opportunities that he had had. Right. And honestly, just developed a love for them, like a motherly type. A lot of them call me mother, right. Mom, right. Just a motherly type, just affection and just wanting them to see. And when you hear their stories, you realize, good grief, there but for the grace of God go I. If I would be the same way. I mean, we had one of our favorite guys that we ministered to, when he was a baby, his dad walked into a bar and traded him for liquor, left him to be raised by the bar owner and his wife. And he was raised by them, but sort of like as a second-class citizen. was when his parents brought in a young man to live, his adopted parents, a young man to live in his house who was homosexual and put him to sleep with this guy in the same bed. And he's not homosexual. Our friend wasn't, but he felt love from this guy. And so it just totally, when you hear their stories, it's just like, that, and the good news of Jesus is that people like that can be changed and rescued. And that is what we want, and so, gosh, we just sort of fell in love with it,
But it comes at a heavy price for you. I mean, I know obviously you've had to raise money to live in Brazil for 20 years, but I think you've mentioned that pretty much all your kids, your whole family has moved back to the States.
Yes.
And so that's a huge distance, and you are a motherly type. So
Yeah.
here you are with your little chicks all here, and you're still down there in Brazil. What keeps you doing that? Why not? I mean, it seemed like it'd be a heavy price to pay for something.
Yeah. I mean, it in a way, it is. And then we have recently kind of just struggled with that because our parents are getting older and our kids are all back here. And so, but we moved to Brazil, because we felt like that's what God wanted us to do. And it was sort of against all odds. Like, we had 4 kids when we moved to Brazil, and people were like, that's a lot of money you got to raise to do that. And, God just sort of took us one step at a time. And we always sort of felt like that when the time came to move back, he would do that same thing again. Right. And so he hasn't done that yet. Right. And so we just, we're happy to be doing what we're doing. But it has posed a challenge because of our family situation, we have needed to come back to the States more often recently. But, one step at a time.
Right.
So,
absolutely. I know I've had that very conversation with my wife when we started this and did this for a number of years. And I remember at one point I kind of hit a point where I was saying, I'm not sure I want to continue this. I'm not sure if this is what I need to be doing. And I remember she said, she simply asked me, she said, well, do you believe God called us to do this? I said, yeah. Well, what's he called you to do now? I said, I don't know. She said, well, then keep doing what you're doing until he calls you something different. Yeah. So I hear you saying very similar, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that passion. And I appreciate listening to you because it excites me about what we're doing when I hear your passion for it. And so I thank you for that. I guess as you, I know we visited some today, as you look in the future at what you hope Hope House can become, what are some of those things? What's your targets? What are your visions? What do you hope becomes of this?
Yeah. Well, we set it up not as a church ministry, but as like a parachurch ministry, which is the same way His Way is set up here. Because what we hoped was that even though like this, the Hope House, the one that we have now, is very much dependent on our church as far as just volunteers, and they don't financially support Hope House, but just as far as just the guys going to worship there and having volunteers and things like that. We had hoped that other churches might see it and go, hey, we like that. Would you want to open up one here and we'll support it? So that's one thing. We've tried to set everything up so that it can be copied. And then as far as just our own ministry, we realized that we needed to get some Brazilian leadership in Hope House because just the fact of our family dynamics and our family situation, we didn't want everything to be dependent on me and my husband being there because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so we wanted to cast the vision for some Brazilian leadership. And so we actually had some friends that we had met through our years in rehab. One of them was actually in rehab when we first started volunteering out there. And he eventually went to work at a mission in Sao Paulo that helps people living on the streets. And then he came back, he got his degree in social work, and then he moved back to Porto Alegre, where we live. And he and his wife, and then one other couple, were already sort of working in this area of ministry to rehab farms, being supported by a church in Nashville, partially supported. And so we invited them and asked them, would you be interested? And they have embraced it. And so we're so thankful that now in the leadership, we have my husband and I, and then these 2 Brazilian couples, and then one other American girl who is has actually interned here at his way, and she has a degree in organizational leadership. And so God brought her at the exact perfect time to get us organized and going in those kinds of ways. So
awesome. That's
yeah.
Great. So how do people find out about you in terms of, first of all, residents? How do guys find out this is a place to go? They come from these, do you know the farms out there?
Yes.
And so they transition from the farm to you? Is that what happens?
Yes.
How does that work?
So we have room for 16 guys in our house right now. And so we started out offering available space to people that we knew in 3 rehab farms, the ones that we actually had experience visiting and knowing. And now we've sort of opened it up to some more, basically just people that we know of, directors of rehab farms that we know of that have given us permission to go in and talk to their guys and say, here's something we have available. And so we're just getting started. So that's kind of how we're doing it right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And they have to have one difference between his way and our program is they have to have finished a program in a therapeutic community or a rehab farm before they come into Hope House.
Right.
It's more like a halfway or a second step for them.
Yeah, in our model, we kind of have a transition houses that we have. We actually have 3 across the street. We use part of this building as a transition as well for guys who've completed the program here and then want to, kind of still have that structured community and still have the support that they need as they start, getting back out and working on their own vehicles after a while and their own jobs and their business. So I think you fit very much in that, which is great. I think it's such a key place. It's one of the areas that we hope to continue to develop more. It's one of our big initiatives actually this year is to try to strengthen that aspect of the program. So, because I think it's so important because what we typically see, we see it, I think in any recovery endeavor, you see this is that there's the relapse problem and challenge that comes in some ways. It's just part of the process of transformation. But obviously we want to try to limit that as much as possible and do everything we can to make sure we give a person the very, very best chance they can have of success. So we anticipate relapse. We don't want to just accept it as this kind of a natural way of doing things, but understand that that's going to be a part of the process as we continue to help people get better.
That's true.
Well, I'm excited about what you guys are doing. I'm excited that we have been a part of what you've done over the years and look forward to being more of a part about it in the future. I know people have been listening and watching. There might be a lot of people interested in how could they get involved. So how would they contact you at Hope House directly?
Okay. So we have an email that they could send a message to. It's called Hope House Brasil, and that's with an S. That's the way we spell it in Brazil, hopehousebrasil@gmail.com.
Okay.
And so they could contact us through there. We have a page on Instagram, which is Hope House Brasil as well, where we're just putting some pictures of the different activities and things so they could contact us through Instagram as well.
Okay.
So
that's excellent. Well, I'm excited that we're going to continue to be a part of your work. And I look forward to that in the future. I appreciate your vision. I appreciate your passion and your sacrifice to make this a reality. I know God's kingdom's better because of what you and Kevin are doing in Brazil. So
well, thank you. Thank you. We're blessed.
And thank you for watching, listening today. If you'd like to know more about His Way, you could check on our website at hiswayinc.org.